Our next presenter is Tiffany Keith. Tiffany is a provisional elder serving quarter time at Colorado Springs First and 3/4 time in a new startup called theEdge. Yes, a new faith community called theEdge, and that's what she's going to be speaking on for us, and so we'll turn it over to Tiffany.
So it was middle of my intern year, and I was sitting in Kent's office, and because he's my site supervisor, it's where I did my internship, and he said, so this is a long shot, and I don't think it's ever going to happen, but what do you think about applying for a grant to start a new community, a new something out of First Church, Colorado Springs? And it was a long shot, and I didn't think it was going to happen, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. In my free time, I applied for a grant from the New Church Development Committee. So when I woke up on July 1st, 2014, as a church planter, it was kind of scary. I started with a blank slate, not too much to work with. I always thought that I wanted this freedom, that I wanted to create something from nothing, and it took me a few months to name the anxiety that I felt with this freedom. So I was a church planter. Bishop Sneezy said it really well last year. He said that creativity requires pressure, that creativity thrives under stress. Apparently, as a color outside the lines personality type, I need lines to color outside of. So I started drawing lines, and the first question I asked is who? Who's going to be in this new community that I'm starting? Of course, First Church has something to do with it. This is their community. And one of the first conversations I had with the New Church Development Committee was that they do not fund programs within churches. So if I start something and I look out and the only people are there are First Church members, then I failed. But that's okay, because there's plenty of other options in downtown Colorado Springs. North of us, there is college-age kids. South of us, there's a large homeless population. And of course, there's all those neighborhoods around downtown, just diverse people down there. One neighborhood in particular, a little southeast of downtown, the main population group is what Experian has called Dare to Dream. They are generally under 35. They work hard. So they work entry-level service jobs. They play hard. They hang out in bars and nightclubs at night. They don't do church. And they dream big. So they really want to be millionaires and rock stars, and they go about it in all the wrong ways. So to be millionaires, they play the lottery. To be rock stars, they upload videos to YouTube. I am this demographic group. This is my friends, my family. This is the neighborhood that I live in. These are my people. It just so happens that I kind of won the lottery when God stepped in and changed the direction of my life. Of course, these are the people that I am going to start a community with and for. These are my people. So I started drawing lines, and the next line I drew was how? How am I going to do this thing? And I don't know about you, but I kind of see us as in the education business. So whether you want to call it making disciples or going on to perfection or spiritual formation or apprenticeshiping, we're here to help people, to teach them how to see and experience the God of love and grace. And there's a lot of education models out there. I took one off of the web. It comes from a blog called User Generated Education. And I took it because she describes different models of education very well, and because she has pretty cute pictures. So, Education 1.0. It is the teacher has something to teach, and the students are there to learn that information, and they can give the information back. So the pastor sits in their study, reads some Bible verses, the commentary, crafts a sermon, and they pass on all that they have learned to their congregation. Education 1.0. Education 2.0. So Stanley Harawas, in his book, Hannah's Child, talks a lot about learning how to be a bricklayer from his dad. And he didn't do it by sitting in the classroom. He did it by working with his dad summer after summer. And he didn't just learn about laying bricks. He learned about hard work and about fairness and segregation and kindness. Education 2.0 is less about the teacher having information to give and more about the teacher creating space for learning to happen. Education 3.0. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to put this back up here in a second, and I'm going to lose every single one of you because it's confusing. So here's the thing. I'll put it back up there. You can look at it for a second. But when I take it back down, I need your attention back. I was teaching a Sunday school class earlier this year, and I was talking about this education and education models. And one of the members looked at me, and he said, "The world is such a confusing place." And when I look at this model, I know exactly what he's saying. And I'm going to try to explain it. I don't know if I know it well enough to explain it, but I'm going to try. So when I woke up on July 1st, 2014, with a blank slate, this is an Education 2.0 learning model. I didn't have a teacher at the front of the room telling me what to do. I had the freedom to explore and learn, and I started making connections. I started pulling information from the business world and from the church world, from the education world, and making connections and getting to know people and other church planters and other new churches. And I am a creator. I create things. So I decided to create a worship service. But I wasn't going to create a 3.0 model worship service. So I am using kind of the 2.0 model where the leader creates this space for learning to happen within. And I created a worship service. And I started practicing it. And I thought it was good, and I ran it across a couple colleagues and some other students at ILIF, and we decided, it's a good service. So we started testing it, trying it out, seeing what the bumps there were and what we needed to do to fix it. And I'm standing there during the middle of one of our test runs, and it occurred to me that I would not invite one of my people from my neighborhood. I couldn't think of any of them that I would bring. If you think about the things that we do in worship, the church, it sings love songs and songs of praise and thanksgiving and adoration. The church confesses its sins. In worship is where the veil is really, really thin. We put down Facebook and we put down our to-do lists and our grocery lists and all the other fig leaves that get in the way, that we might see God a little clearer and that God might see us. Worship is a place where the church stands naked before God. If the church is the bride of Christ, then worship is what happens in the master bedroom. And I was building the master bedroom off the front door. no wonder I was not interested in inviting outsiders in. It was just weird. And I felt like a failure, but I stopped. I stopped what we were doing. I backed up, and I looked again. What was God calling me to? What was authentic to me? What could I create that invited the people from First Church in that they could be proud to call their own? What could I create that would invite my people into where they could glimpse the love and the grace of God? And I realized as I was looking at this and thinking about this, that the one thing they all had in common, the one thing we all have in common, is that God is at work in our lives. So the Book of Discipline has this really awesome line that says Christianity does not jump from New Testament times to today, as if there was no great cloud of witnesses in between. We are part of the great cloud of witnesses. We are leading the great cloud of witnesses. And I want to know what they're seeing. So with that conviction and that focus, I started again. And theEdge was born. We are creating a space for people to be authentic and vulnerable and courageous. We are creating a space where people can step outside of their comfort zones and take risks. And where when they step out, they encounter God's grace in very real ways. And one of the things we do is Stories at the Edge. So it is beautifully simple. We have dinner, we break bread with one another, and after dinner, we hear 3 personal stories. And people are so ready to share their stories. Before Stories at the Edge began, before the very first one, I was in a bar and talking about our plans and what we were going to do, and the bartender said, "Hey, I really want to come tell my story." So our first Stories at the Edge, we had an ex-heroin addict tell us how he found God coming clean, sitting in jail. And that night, Sam was there. Sam is an unchurched young adult, and I had his story in my hands within a week. And his story was a hard one to hear too. He was homeless and married when he was 18, and they had a baby, and they had their baby taken away. And Sam told his story in May. And when Sam told his story, I almost just could see and feel the presence of God in ways that I can't barely describe. It was amazing. So I had to preach on it, of course. In July, I preached Sam's story at First United Methodist. Part of his story was part of my sermon. And we happened to have a youth choir as a guest choir that day. And a couple days later, I got an email from one of the adult chaperones of the youth choir. And he said, "Hey, can I fly back from Texas and share my story with you sometime?" Absolutely, he can. People are ready to share their stories, and we do all we can to make it safe for them to do so. And one of the things we do is we make sure that as many people in the room are uncomfortable as possible. We want people stepping outside of their comfort zones, which in some ways is easy. We have between 30 and 40 people come every time, and most of them are there for the first time. And we don't give them an order of service. They have no idea what's going to happen next. So just that does most of the work for us. They're pretty uncomfortable anyway. And then we start giving jobs away. So I'll walk up to somebody, "Hey, do you want to be the table host for tonight?" Yeah, that makes people pretty uncomfortable too. So September, one of my lead team decided to take the liturgist job. And about 10 minutes before service started, she decided to give it away. So she had the job, and she gave it to a member of First Church. And he said, "Of course I can do this. I'll take it." He figured, First Church member, he'll read a couple of things when it's time to read them, and it'll be all good. And then he read the instructions, which start out with, welcome the people and say something about the edge. And he had never been there before. But he got up there and he did awesome. As a pastor, I really want to lead things starting at the beginning and lead them all the way to the end and get rid of as many bumps as possible. When I'm doing stories at the edge, my job is to create a safe place for the bumps to happen, for the imperfections to occur, and for it to be okay. So my musician, about 20 seconds into a song in September, stopped and said, I messed up. I have to start again. And it was absolutely okay. We've made the space safe for people to be vulnerable, for them to mess up, and we pour on the grace. By far, the most vulnerable people are the storytellers. They are taking the biggest risk. So we have a whole system designed around them that they might encounter the love and the grace of God. They email me their stories about a month ahead of time, and I email them to what we call story guides. Story guides, first and foremost, are their cheerleaders. They are a friendly face in the crowd of strangers. They make sure that they know they're loved. And the story guide is a pastoral care presence, if one is needed. And they're theologically grounded. So our story guides are always churched people. And they're editors. So if I get a story in that's 30 minutes long, it's the story guide's job to work with the storyteller to get it down to 10. And then on the night of the stories, the story guide introduces the storyteller. And the storyteller tells their story. And then afterwards, the musician plays a song. And he also got the story about a month ahead of time. So he picks a song and plays a song that is reflective of what he has seen in the story. And after we hear the song, I start a short discussion time. And the first question I ask, you might recognize it, is what word or phrase is bubbling up with you now? What is sparkling and shining? So Joyce de Tony Hill came earlier, and she told her story. And she talked about the things that led up to her interests in pilgrimage. And she talked about being a pastor, and about the conflicts we encounter, and about the weights we sometimes carry. And when I asked the people in the room, what word or phrase is bubbling up with you now? She heard words like courageous and brave. And I talked to her the next day, and she said, I've never thought of what we do as brave. After the night is over, we send people home with gift bags. And in the gift bags, we have prayer stations. When I get the story in, I take the story, and I have a team of people. And we read the story, and we ask questions. Where is God? Where is God showing up? And a symbol kind of bubbles up out of the story. And then from the symbol, we create a prayer station. So Sandy Johnson, she flew in from Baltimore and came and told her story in September. And she talked about her daughter, Tracy. And she talked about her being diagnosed with MS at 23. And how a tickle in her foot led to her needing a cane, and then a walker, and then a wheelchair. And Sandy talked about her daughter. It felt like a life unraveling, like health unraveling. And then Tracy tried an experimental drug that was supposed to reverse the MS. And just weeks later, she passed away. And there is the rawness to her story that through the whole time trying to hold our own strength to try to stop the unraveling still happened. And what was left was her heart, broken, but She didn't have the strength to stop the unraveling, but God held her in God's strong hands. Sandy, that night, our grandson was there, and I asked him as we left, I said, "What did you think?" And he looked at me and he said, "That was unpleasant in all the right ways." He totally got it. We do everything we can to respond deeply and honestly to the stories that we hear. We don't say shallow good jobs or that was touching. We connect with the stories. We say, "We see you and you are not alone." At First Church, we talk a lot about the Hebrews and leaving Egypt and compare it to church change and what's going on now. And I just took a trip to California with my lead team, and we did some new church start training. And one of my people was a little frustrated. And she said, "I just want our vision. I want our mission. I want to know where we're going and when we're going to get there and how we're going to be there. And I don't know what the land of milk and honey looks like yet. I don't know how we're going to get there. I don't know the stops along the way." And I couldn't tell her. But what I do know is that God promised those people that he would go before them in pillar of fire by night and pillar of cloud by day. And I know that if you look close enough, that cloud is still there. It still leads us now. And if you stop and look even closer, you will see that that cloud is that great cloud of witnesses leading the way. So I'm going to open it up for questions first. If there's any questions about theEdge or about stories at theEdge that we're doing.
You said you do stories once a month.
I didn't say that, but you know that. I do other things too. So
let's talk about the other things.
Okay, so first of all, first Stories at theEdge was in December, and then we did March. So we did a 3-month break, and then we did May, July, September. So we did every other month, and then we're doing a 3-month run. So September, October, and November. So this Friday is Stories at theEdge, and it puts a little bit more pressure on us than I thought it would, but it is. So the other things that we're doing. Right away, the question is, you can't meet once every 3 months and form a community. It doesn't happen. So we were meeting. We created it's basically a small group. It didn't have a whole lot of purpose other than we need something. So on the second and fourth Fridays, we were having, it's kind of like dinner church. We have dinner, we have conversation, and we have church. And that over the last 7-8 months has really actually formed a community, and it's ended up being my lead team. But that always felt like a temporary place to me to kind of funnel people into. What's coming now that we've done Stories at theEdge enough is we're learning that we need teams of people to kind of pull it off. So we're creating small groups basically out of the teams. So out of the crafters team, like we met on Wednesday and we crafted these gifts and talked about the stories and what we see in them and where we see God. And the storytellers will probably eventually have a small group that they are into. So who's coming? Who's the 30 to 40 people? So it depends first and foremost on who my storytellers are. If I have 3 church storytellers, it basically feels like we're doing a church service. If my favorite thing to do is I have one church storyteller, one first church storyteller, I have one storyteller from a different church, and one that is not churched. And normally the room makeup matches that. So 1/3 of the people from First United Methodist Church, A third of the people are from a different church, and a handful are not sure what they are. Easter, Christmas sort of show up sometimes kind of people, and about a handful have not done church and don't ever do church. I feel like we are creating something that First Church generally is extremely proud to call their own. Me and Kent have a lot of lovely conversations. Yeah, so I mean, we talk a lot, and it's a good setting because we do. He does challenge me, and I challenge him back on what does church look like and what pulls church into the future. But I don't feel like what we're doing is trying to replace traditional church. I am trying to get my people to even just a glimpse of God. I talked to my brother. So my brother was a cook. The first story's at theEdge in December. And it was funny because I go downstairs to the First Church's kitchen, and he looks at me with the weirdest confused look on his face. And he says, okay, my brother's totally unchurched, and he goes, "I'm giving. I don't understand this." Like, he was caught himself in the act of giving and had no idea what to do about it. And I talked to him on the phone 3 days ago, and he's like, there's something. And I don't know how that happened, but I wonder if he got a glimpse of something in that one night that kind of opened doors for him later. And I think that is a different, I don't want to say mission statement, it's a different mission than First. I don't feel like I conflict with them. I hope not too much. So I don't think this would work in a church. I think there's a lot to it that you could form something different that would work in a church. But I don't think it itself does, because First Church owns a building half a block down. It's a dance studio and art studio, so it's kind of a blank slate for me to work with, and that's my building. I kind of get to do stuff there. But because it's not used by First Church, nobody has home turf. It puts everybody on equal footing and, makes everybody uncomfortable. It would totally be unfair if a third of them felt like they were at home. Because I don't think they're walking into a space where the church people are uncomfortable and have it all together, or the church people are comfortable and have it together. I think because everybody is a little uncomfortable, everybody's on equal footing. And we do try to do what we can to build in some comfort zone spots to start building community. And more than likely, if they're unchurched, they're there because somebody invited them, so they're not there alone. They're there with friends, probably a storyteller. And I think that breaks down barriers. As we create space for others, are there boundaries? I would sort of hope that most people have good social boundaries. That's not always true. Yeah, I think, I'm doing something really simple up here that's saying what we're doing, and I did that in, I don't know how long, like 20 minutes. There's all sorts of ways that we create that space in ways that are safe, or I try to anyway. So at the end of the night, I have everybody come up and lay their hands on, blessing the storytellers and the musicians and the cooks and stuff. But when I invite people up, I say, you can stay in your seat and just lift your hand, or if you want, you can come up and bless the storytellers. And in that way, we kind of try to make options and boundaries.